Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be the position 4 tier list for patch 7.34e, and just like I said in the other ones, we're going to be doing tier lists a little bit differently, where we're going to be doing it for average pubs, just your average MMR pubs, not like the 10k MMR. We're obviously going to be looking at all those stats for all those games and all that kind of stuff, but we're going to be tailoring it a little bit more towards the lower end of the spectrum, just because, my channel in general is geared towards those players, those kind of newer players trying to learn heroes and all that kind of stuff. But also I think it's just better for the overall community to know what's good at your MMR, not necessarily what's the best at 10k, because although you're going to be looking at all those heroes and the best ones that the pros are picking are probably the best ones in the patch in general, sometimes the lower MMR you go, a certain hero becomes less viable or another hero becomes more viable because of the dynamic of playing around your teammates and all that kind of stuff. So that's how we're going to be doing these hopefully into the future, I think. I don't know, we'll see how we mix it up, but for this week and this tier list, this is how it's going to be. So let's just jump into the S tier. First, we're going to have Dark Willow. Just far and away, probably the best forward position, just the best support right now in this position, because honestly, you just have brambles everywhere. You're just rooting people constantly, especially with the shard, and it's just so annoying to deal with. But then the real big change was that now you can put your ultimate onto a tanky strength hero that loves to go in, which there's so many of those these days that just they're hard to bring down. Now they're doing extra damage that you put on them and help them, so you can sit in the back with this hero and just cast all your abilities from range, which are very annoying to deal with. And then you also can escape pretty easily without even having to buy an item. Then obviously not every game this is going to happen, but if it really goes late and you can get a lot of farm, you can become kind of a carry from the offlane. Now, it's probably less of a carry from the offlane as some of these other heroes that are playing, or not offlane, sorry, 4 position these days, but still, you can carry once you get an axe. You can carry if it goes 40, 50, 60 minutes. But it's just that you're not relying on that. That's not the main thing you're going to be doing. It's kind of a luxury item later from the 4 position to be a carry. But there's a lot of offlanes and a lot of 4 positions that are just becoming more of like, you have 4 carries in the game these days. That's just kind of like how the patch is going and how Dota is going in general since they expanded the map. And Dark Willow is really good at that. Very good for all these different dynamic reasons, but then also late game, if you do get that luxury item, you can become kind of a carry in that way. And then Spirit Breaker, a great offlane, but also a great 4 position right now. This hero just causes so much chaos. I think the difference between 4 and 3 is not that big of a deal. It's kind of just a great offlaner, great 4 position. Maybe a little bit better of an offlaner because you do want some items, but still, you could still have insane impact with this hero from the 4 position. You're more of like a ganking mid. Obviously, you're not getting as much farm, but eventually you honestly can get as much farm and become just another offlaner that just, if you have a more carry from the offlane, then as the 4 position Spirit Breaker, you just kind of become the offlane yourself, and that's just how this hero works. There's nothing too special to say about Spirit Breaker. It just has been good. It's been nerfed a little bit in the last 6 months to a year, but it just hasn't been nerfed enough that this hero is not viable anymore. It's still very viable. Now, I'm not sure about, clearing creep waves and all that kind of stuff with your bash. I mean, that's been nerfed. It doesn't farm nearly as quickly, but from the 4 position, you don't really have to worry about that as much. That's why this hero is still very good. Also causes a lot of chaos in lower MMRs. Like, the lower you go with this hero, the better. Then Shadow Shaman is just like typical standard good support from the 4 position. And that's why I think I'm putting it up here in the S tier, because it is getting picked a decent amount. It does have a good win rate at high MMR, but I just think the lower you go with this hero, the better it is because of all the lockdown you're getting and because of your ability to push and all that kind of stuff. I've seen some of these kind of cheesy, kind of griefy Shadow Shamans where they just go like a full offensive kind of build where they're just trying to stun people and kill them full to 0 and push towers with their wards and split push and do all this crazy stuff, not really playing with their team. I've seen people do that, but I've seen it work. And the fact that you can even do that with this hero kind of lends itself to saying how it's good solo, it's good, it's viable by itself, it's very independent, and you can carry games with it basically straight up. And the lower MR you go, the more capable you are of doing that, because the worse players are, and the more you can get pickoffs and push and do all this crazy stuff. And then if you need to play with your team, if you're going to play with your team, which you probably should most of the time, you have great stuns. Also believe they just buffed the hero and gave it more damage on Hex when you do. Yeah, damage amplification has increased on this, and that's a lot. That's a significant amount. This hero kind of counters strength heroes now because of this Hex change. That's very good. Then the next 2 heroes are basically carries from the 4 position, which are just kind of the trend here. Carries from the offlane, carries from the 4 position. This hero plays carry. It's very good right now. It's also a decent offlane carry, but I think it's actually just better if you're going to play, instead of picking it offlane, just pick it 4 position, because you're extremely viable. It's extremely popular. It has a decent win rate, and the lower MMR you go, the more you're just going to be able to get away with it. It's a little bit different than it used to be, where it was all about like the bugs and all that kind of stuff. But now it's still similar. The bugs are very good. It's still very annoying. Before it was like bugs early on and then ags. You would just rush ags. Now you're not even really rushing ags. Like you're honestly not even getting ags. You're just becoming a carry from the 4 position. Really there's not much else to say about it. I don't think you buy straight up Deso, but you just buy more like kind of these, similar to how Nature's Prophet's being played these days from the support. You're buying these like pseudo carry / support items like Solar Crest and other things like that to just help you do right click damage and carry a little bit, but then also kind of can be support items as well. And then lastly, we have Muerta. Now, this hero was nerfed a little bit, but not nearly enough. This hero is just a beast from the 4 position, and it's probably her best position right now just because she is so powerful that you don't really need a ton of farm. You honestly just run in, you click your ultimate, and you're just melting people. And yes, your laning stage is not nearly as good since the nerfs, and you do have some problems in the 4 position, so it's not as viable, I would say. But that doesn't really matter because the lower MMR you go, like being an insane dominant laning stage hero is not as important. Like it's all about, okay, I'm viable in the lane, I can be annoying, I can harass you, I can slow you and silence you. Plus then you're maxing that spell out anyway. The one that got nerfed with the slow, I don't remember all this hero's spell names by the way, but the one that got nerfed with the slow and the silence, that you're maxing that out. So it's just the very, very, very early game is not as good. And that doesn't matter in lower MMR because who really cares? Like you're still going to scale the same way and still be insanely powerful later in the game. So that's Muerta. Next we have A tier. These are all pretty viable heroes. I would say Nature's Prophet. I don't love the hero in the support position. It just feels weird and awkward, but it is a carry from the 4 position, carry from the offlane patch, and this hero does that. It's very weird now with the way Sprout works and you're doing damage and all this stuff, and people have been able to play around it. But honestly, if you're going to find people that don't buy Quelling Blade on a support, you're going to find it at, your average pubs or below average pubs. People are probably just, I'm not buying Quelling Blade, I'm not doing that. So you're probably going to be able to snowball with this hero. Now, it can kind of fall off, it can feel bad, and that's the weird thing is I don't know if I love it. Honestly, I debated putting it a little bit lower than this just because I feel like people are not good at it at lower MMRs, but I don't think that's necessarily fair because if you are good at it and you know what you're doing, you can play really well and it can dominate. So I think that's just watching replays, figuring out the play style, and then just implementing it correctly, like knowing where to TP, when to TP, how to do it, your positioning, all that kind of stuff. It's very, very important because if you're not good at that and you're not like playing around the map and constantly looking around the map, you're not going to like play to the full hero's potential. Then Nyx Assassin. The reason why Nyx Assassin is up here is because this hero, although it's kind of underrated, I would say, it's not picked as much as it was maybe 6 months to a year ago when it was completely broken after they changed the way it worked. It's actually still very, very good and kind of underrated. And you can literally dominate games. You can solo kill carries on this hero still. Now, obviously, with a lot of the heart builders and tanky heroes and stuff, you're maybe not going to kill offlaners as easily, but you can still blow up heroes insanely well with this hero, and it's very, very annoying. And the lower you go, the less people buy sentries, the less people buy dust, the more people are alone, solo, not caring about the Nyx, and then you just catch them farming and just kill them, or wrap yourself around the back line of the fight and just kill supports, pick them off really easily. So Nyx Assassin's still very viable, one of my favorite supports actually, since they made the change to just like the one-shot hero. Gyrocopter, actually pretty popular now as a support, as this magic damage build. You can actually get away with it. I don't think higher MMR players are playing it that much, but it is still definitely viable where you can play it. Next we have Earthshaker. He's just basically, a typical 4 position. I think he's pretty good right now. Not nearly as good, I think, as he once was 6 months ago or so. They nerfed him a bit, but I still think he's definitely viable because the main thing that they nerfed before was the offlane version of this hero. And this hero is still generally a pretty good 4 position because you're not relying on that Ags and doing a ton of damage and all that kind of stuff. You just do all those same things. Now, I don't think it kind of is hit or miss, but I just think that you can have a lot of impact with this hero from the 4 position, especially at lower MMRs. You can honestly cause a ton of chaos, and people aren't in usually very good positions. And so also I think having reliable stuns and lockdown is just so valuable the lower MMR you go. I think it's also valuable just in general, but the lower you go, the better it is because you're just going to have to get those reliable stuns, those cancels of TPs, that annoying fissure in team fights and all that kind of stuff. Then we have Pugna. Pugna, it's just kind of been one of these heroes that they nerf it and it seems to go away for a little bit, but then it comes back and people are like, oh yeah, well this hero is still really good at healing people and just being super annoying in the fights. And I don't think that's really different right now. It's basically the same exact thing that it's always been from the 4 position as a support. And they've almost been trying to make it like more of a mid, kind of buffing it in this mid style, but then that just buffs it a little bit, and they're like, well, actually, even though you wanted us to play this mid, or it's kind of like a mid buff, it actually just makes the support hero version better too, so we're just going to play it as a support like it usually is. So it's just annoying. You can actually, you drain people, you can use it offensively a little bit more these days than you usually were just saving people, so it's kind of a mix of both, but still pretty good in that way. Then we have Bounty Hunter. This hero really is another carry from the 4 position, because you can have those games where you're just absolutely snowballing, absolutely dumpstering people, and you can have a lot of effectiveness. It can be very annoying for the enemy carry, for people that are farming alone, but the problem is a little bit that the map is kind of big, can be a little bit difficult to choke the map out, even though that's kind of what you want to do. But you can have these games, where you're not really ganking anybody, you're not harassing anyone, they're turning on you, you're feeding, all that kind of stuff, and it just feels bad in some of those games. But otherwise, I think especially the lower you go, the less people are coordinated, the less people are ganking and protecting their carries and their cores and all that kind of stuff, and the more impact you're going to be able to have, and the more you're going to be able to transition into just like feeding off those supports and feeding off those people farming alone and split pushing and all that kind of stuff. And next we have Skywrath. I think Skywrath is pretty good right now. I'm kind of valuing him a little bit higher than I think he otherwise would be in higher MMRs, because I think you just can't count out all the damage that he's doing from the 4 position. I know it's not really a carry, but I think you just can afford to get your items and have impact like you otherwise wouldn't in patches before, where there wasn't as much space on the map, where a lot of cores, they can farm jungle and do other things, and you can take a lane and this kind of stuff. And obviously there's a Necro that's very popular right now in mid and off lane, and this hero counters that hero fairly well. And there's just other heroes matchups that are pretty good right now that I think this hero can be definitely viable, especially the lower you get in MMRs. Obviously the counter to this hero is that it's super squishy, hard to survive. You just get jumped on and blown up, but I think that that's not going to be as big of a deal the lower MMR you go, and so that's why I put Skywrath up here. Although I would see it obviously being a B tier, that would make sense to me too. And then Phoenix, I think this hero, just because you're going to get late game, and late game this hero is insane. I think early game is kind of underwhelming. The ganking isn't really great. You're more just like saving people. There's just parts of it that are underwhelming, but if you're a good Phoenix player, you can survive that, have some impact, and then late games, this hero's just a beast. It's honestly crazy. Now, the only thing you have to worry about is like egg positioning and stuff, and team coordination, making sure that people are actually like fighting around that. But that's honestly a lot on you too, where how you cast it, when you cast it, waiting for your team to commit, and then casting it. So it obviously takes a little bit of coordination, but I still think the late game, you cannot count this hero out. It's one of those heroes that you don't necessarily have to be a right-click carry to be a carry in the late game from the 4 position, where you're just carrying the game solo anyway, even though you're not doing it with right clicks. Your ultimates are just insane. And then Enchantress, the reason why I put Enchantress up here is because I actually don't think it's a great Enchantress patch. You don't see it all that much. But the reason why I'm putting it up here is because if you can learn how to play Enchantress, and you can be a good Enchantress player, you can be another kind of like Weaver-ish, Muerta-ish right-click carry from the 4 position. Now, you obviously have to be good, because you have to know how to play the hero, how to abuse the creep and the dispel and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the dispel is also very good against some heroes these days, like Necro, which is another good example. But still, you have to be able to use this hero effectively early game and know how to position it, know how to, when you can use your like kind of unkillability, and when that is the case against what matchups, when you can just front line and be hard to kill and they waste a lot of resources on you and all that kind of stuff. It's one of these heroes you have to play a lot. You have to kind of feel it out and all that kind of stuff. You can't just like have no experience and be good with it. So that is one thing that makes it, not as viable, is because it's all about experience, but it's like kind of like a cheese hero in the sense of, if you can play this, if you can get good at it, if you can practice it and you spam it, you will probably just automatically gain MMR. That's why I kind of put it up here, because it's one of these heroes. That's why I put it on the end here. It's like, if you play it and you're really good at it, you can spam it and gain a lot of MMR. You won't be low MMR anymore, at least from the 4 position, from the support position in general. It's just like a reliable hero. You could probably play like almost every patch and be really good. You often see Puppy doing that, honestly, with Enchantress. Even patches where you don't think Enchantress is good, Puppy will play it. Then we have B tier here. These are all just like decent average 4 positions, and some of these are just like 5 positions even. So we have Grimstroke, I think more of a 5, but definitely can be played as a 4. Just very strong right now. Has been one of the strongest supports in the patch. I don't remember the 5 tier list that I have yet, but I think this is probably S tier. It's just that it's not as much of a 4. That's why it's down here. And same thing with Dazzle. Dazzle more of a core, honestly, but then if you're going to play at support, you're probably going to play at 5. That's why these two heroes are down here, although they are very good right now. And then you have Earth Spirit, just more of like an early game ganking kind of hero, just doesn't have his place exactly in the meta in terms of like being super viable and super like late game carry, just more of a brawling fighting hero, which can feel not as good sometimes, even though the 4 position it's better than the off lane, but still, or mid. But still, just I'd rather almost have like this more easy, simple lockdown and straight up carry. That's kind of similar with Tiny here, just more of a lockdown kind of burst damage hero, but I'd rather, something else up here. If I'm going to do burst damage, I would take something different than that. I would take Spirit Breaker rather than these guys a lot of the times. And so there's always just alternates to these two heroes. But if some of these heroes are banned, you want more stuns and these kinds of things and brawling, you can definitely pick these heroes. Lion, just kind of a worse Shadow Shaman in a lot of different ways. Has very similar kit, but then the ultimate's just not as good. And then I don't even think, let me check. Yeah, this doesn't have the damage buff that this has, which is very interesting that this just like damage amps, but this one doesn't. Venge, more of a 4, but the problem is you want to get Ags, you want to get your shard, you want to get Ags, you want to get gold, and it can feel awkward sometimes to farm that on this hero. So that's why it's not super viable, but can be very good because obviously in lower MMRs, the later it goes, the more viable you're going to be once you get more items, and then you're going to be very, very annoying swapping people in and out of position and all that kind of stuff, and saving allies as well. Then you have Hoodwink. I think this is just like middle of the road, average, good hero. Little bit of everything. Good at a little bit of everything. And, has a break, has some damage, has some stun, pretty elusive, plays the back line, a little bit of everything. You can kind of transition into a carry a little bit, although it's semi-grief. It's not exactly grief, getting a Maelstrom and stuff like that, although people might get mad at you. That's the only problem with lower MMRs is you can kind of get away with it if you can and you're really impactful, but then if people see you buying a Maelstrom, they might be mad at you. So just keep that in mind. Tusk, another middle of the road, pretty good, pretty average. Nothing crazy to say about it. Just, you'd probably rather have some other heroes, but it's still very good, very average, and does the 4 position stuff all around well. It's just that you are not going to be doing a ton of damage later in the game. And then Zeus, kind of the exact opposite. Just no utility, all damage. The problem is you'd probably rather have one of these heroes that also has some utility, but I think you can definitely get away with it. I'm putting it in B tier because the lower you go, the more viable it is, because you can transition from the 4 position into kind of a mid, and a lot of these 4 positions are kind of transitioning like mid heroes into this like 4th core a lot of the times. So that's why I think Zeus is semi-viable. The higher MR you go, the worse it is, I think. Then C tier here, we have sort of decent heroes that have fallen off, but I think some heroes that should probably be like D or F tier even, but I think at lower MRs they can stomp. Marcy, just not very popular right now. Does all the same stuff Marcy does, but just not great. Ricky, it's just literally another carry from the 4 position, but you'd rather play like Weaver or something. But I mean, you could get away with it, and that's the same thing with Clinks. Like you could get away with it, but it's a little bit griefy. But I'm putting it up here because I think just the lower you go, the more viable these two heroes are. Techie's great hero 6 months ago. They just nerfed it and nerfed it and nerfed it. Still think it's semi-viable. I even thought about maybe putting it B tier, but I think it's kind of fallen off a cliff with its damage numbers and all these other nerfs to it that I don't think it's nearly as good as it once was, but it's still pickable for sure. And same thing with Clockwork. They keep trying to buff the hero, but just never kind of comes around to being actually good. Although it's definitely pickable. It's definitely good if you know what you're doing against the right matchups. You just have to be able to run people down early with your battery assault and make sure you are going to have actual impact where you can actually like hook in and stun people and get out without just like feeding. You don't just want to be fodder. Mirana nerfed a ton, I think, in the last like year or so. This hero was really viable as a 4 position, but I think it's kind of fallen off. But also, I just don't love this hero at lower MMRs, except for the fact that I do like the hero because of the ultimate. So it's like this weird kind of give and take where all of the other abilities and all the things this hero does, you kind of need setup. You need to play around someone else on your team. You need coordination, and it can feel very awkward and bad and like you're doing absolutely nothing on the map in lower MMRs because what does this hero really do, honestly, if you think about it? Just like clears waves kind of, I guess, maybe, and then like hopefully you have a stun and you can set it up and get your arrow from long range, but and like, yeah, it has an escape, but who cares? The real thing is honestly clicking R. And the lower MMR you go, clicking R is really good. But that's the problem. This is like, that's all you do. It just feels awkward and weird. And so it's definitely still viable, pickable, but not great. Pudge, kind of a meme hero, but still decent. I mean, if you're a good hooker and you can get your shard and save people, you can still be good. If you're good at this hero, it can still definitely be viable. Kind of similar to some of these other heroes. Dawnbreaker. I just always put Marcy and Dawnbreaker like next to each other because they were released around the same time. Not exactly, but I feel like they're very similar styles in terms of forward position, in terms of support. Like you would think they would normally be core, but because of like how their ultimate works for Marcy and then how like all the damage and stuff works for Dawnbreaker, but still a decent support. You can definitely get away with it. I don't think it's very popular now, but it's definitely possible. The save can't be counted out, especially with the Ags and everything now. I've seen some Batrider support. I think I saw it more a few months ago. Definitely was more popular back then, I think, but it's still definitely viable. I just think it's something where it's maybe a higher MMR phenomena because people know how to play Bat, and so they're just like, oh, I'm just going to pick it as a 4 position. But I don't know that, the lower you go, the less likely I'm going to be confident that your skill with Batrider is going to be good enough that you're going to be able to pick it 4. But hey, if you're good, it's kind of like one of those things. If you're good enough and you can pick it just like, Nature's Prophet, if you're good enough, you know what you're doing, just pick it and you can be really good at it. Like same thing with Enchantress. But it's still, even despite that, it's only going to be okay. And then Doom is just kind of like, this is the greediest pick of all time. Like you think Weaver's a greedy pick? You think Muerta's a greedy pick from the 4 position? Nah, it's Doom. Doom is the greediest 4 position of all time. It can work, but it's extremely greedy. And again, lower Mars, hey, maybe it's better if it is greedy. D tier, these are all like, I guess you can pick them, but stop. Invoker, like I guess, but I don't know. People keep trying to make it work from the 4 position. I just don't see it being really that great. I mean, I think the lower MR you go, if you're good at the hero, you can actually make it work. Like if you're just a mid hero and you're getting those 4 position Q games, like I guess you could pick it. That's fine. Keep it light. I think it's all about like matchups. Sometimes it just feels like, what is this hero actually doing in the 4 position? Like you're just going to be doing way more with some of these other heroes up here. And this hero just feels like nothing. Like you're not doing anything. Unless you're with a Bristleback, but even then, like, you're just giving the Bristleback mana and the cooldown and stuff, but like, I don't know. That doesn't feel great, honestly. It just feels very low impact compared to a lot of these other sports. Rubik, I hate this hero in terms of like average pubs. Just stop. Just don't play this hero if you're just like an average pub player. I just don't think it's very good. I think it is one of those kind of like, Enchantress type heroes where sure, if you love Rubik, if you're obsessed with the hero and you want to spam it, go ahead. Be my guest. Do that. I mean, if you have fun with it, you want to have fun playing Dota, that's okay. I have no problem with that. But in terms of gaining MMR, what's best for it, I don't think it's really that great. But if you get very good at it and you know what you're doing, you can definitely carry games. I just don't think that's happening at low MMR. Shadow Demon, decent. I think it was more popular before. I think it's more of a 5 than a 4, but I just rather have other heroes. Silencer, more of a 5. Io, more of a 5. They just don't feel great from the 4 position. I just don't think it's very viable. I think Io even maybe is F tier. I'm just not putting it F tier because it's like, at least it is a support, but don't pick it, especially at average MMRs. Venno, just an awkward spot. I just don't know what this hero does because as a 4 position, you just have no farm. You don't do anything. You just kind of like gale people early on and then just like hope they die. But then after that, it's like, okay, well now what do? I just die. I just feed. I don't really do anything. It's very awkward from the 4 position. And then Primal Beast, like, I just have this here because, like, you can pick it. It was getting picked at one point a little bit as a 4 position. You can still kind of do it, I guess, but I don't love it because I don't really love it as a core regardless at lower MMRs. And then in general, this hero just has a 4 position. It feels like, oh, that's all that stuff just compounded even more because now you're not getting tanky. You're not doing crazy late game stuff. You don't get this Ags, but yeah, what are you really doing? I mean, it can work, I guess, but I don't love it. And then F tier, none of these heroes right now I think are viable in the support position. Lena, not really. Queen, not really. This is all kind of like garbage. I just want to carry, like I'm griefing the game kind of stuff. Enigma's a dead hero. Snapfire just absolutely got murdered a couple patches ago. They just like, I think this hero and Mars have just always been good, and they've just always somehow gotten back into the meta, and then they've just been like annihilated by nerfs over the past couple years. Monkey, just really not fun. This is the carry in the carry in the 4 position. I've probably been saying that the whole entire video. This entire video I've probably been saying offlane and meant 4 position. This is the carry from the 4 position that is just too far. Like, you've gone too far. Don't play carry in the 4 position with Monkey King. Just stop. And that's the same thing with Sniper. Like, guys, the Ags build is dead. It's been dead for a while. Stop it. Don't pick this hero as the 4 position. I get it. We're getting 4 carries. We have Muerta up here, but still, you're slow with Shrapnel. It's not as good. Just don't do it. So that is my 4 position tier list for patch 7.34e. As always, guys, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.